In the history of British car design, some names shimmer like chrome in the sun: Chapman, Isigonis, and Lyons. But others work in shadows, chiselling beauty from fiberglass and steel, with little more than instinct, courage, and a pencil. The designer Dennis Adams was one of them. With his brother Peter, Dennis co-founded a design house that never quite fit in. That's because they were always one step ahead. While others styled cars, Dennis shaped statements. In the early 1960s, Dennis was the design muscle behind one of Britain's most unusual success stories, Marcos. Marcos had already made headlines by building lightweight race cars with wooden chassis, but Dennis, ever the futurist, wanted more. He sculpted aerodynamic designs, low, lean, alien-looking machines that slashed through the wind. Cars like the Marcos 1800 GT, with its long bonnet and cockpit-like cabin, were years ahead of their time. But it wasn't enough. Dennis wanted to push the envelope. He left Marcos to pursue something bolder, a new vision for the car of tomorrow. What followed was the Adams Probe series, radical concept cars that looked like props from a futuristic movie. In fact, one car, the Probe 16, appeared as Durango 95 in the Stanley Kubrick film A Clockwork Orange. The Probe 15 and later the Probe 16 sat just 29 inches tall. You didn't open a door, you climbed in through the roof. Designed not for comfort but to question everything about what a car could be, the Probes were pure design experiments, art on wheels. And yet, they roared and ran. They turned heads across Europe and America, but even visionaries get older. In the 1980s, Dennis's eyes turned from the future to historic nostalgia. He began sketching something traditional, something elegant. A return to the classic British Roadster, but through the lens of a master designer. What emerged was the Adams Roadster. Built in small numbers, this car was never widely marketed. It was crafted, not manufactured, by Dennis and a few trusted collaborators. A little bit Jaguar, a little bit Healey, but unmistakably Adams. Most believed the Roadster was Dennis's final work, but in the shadows he kept tinkering. He designed the Rotrax, a Cortina-based buggy which spawned the Dakar 4x4, a Range Rover-derived kit car built for adventure. There were whispers, too, of an experimental Reliant-based prototype called the Black Prince, and even vague murmurs of freelance work for Aston Martin, though no record survives to confirm it. Maybe Dennis liked it that way. When Dennis Adams passed, many of his creations slipped quietly into garages, barns, and the memories of enthusiasts. But the Roadster never truly died. One of them, a car thought forgotten, resurfaced, unfinished, damaged, and faded, until a builder named Chris Hollier picked up the phone.
Hello? Is this Chris Hollier?
It all started with a phone call. It was a dreary day at the end of a lacklustre British summer, and workshop progress was slow as I battled my way through yet another batch of welding repairs to yet another rusty Volkswagen camper van. Then the phone chirped into life on the workshop wall. "Is that Chris Hollier?" questions an unknown voice on the other end of the line. My first reaction nowadays is to listen for a faraway accent and then just put the phone down, rather than waste time and breath on another call that promises not to sell me anything. But this was a polite and gentle Southern English accent, so the frosty response was definitely not called for. My tentative yes was greeted with a sigh of relief after what subsequently appeared to be some rather gifted detective work. Apparently, the caller had managed to track me down some 20-odd years after I had built an Adams Roadster kit for a customer in Wales. He had fallen in love with the design of the car at one of the long-forgotten Sandown Park kit car shows, August 1991 to be exact, and had been dreaming of owning one ever since, with even a picture of said model adorning his office wall for all that time. His aged copies of kit car magazines had finally proven useful, and his dogged determination had led him from an old phone number in a feature via many intermediary inquiries to my current location. He introduced himself as Patrick Adam, no connection to the manufacturer surprisingly, and was after any information I might be able to offer regarding the cars. After 23 years, he had just acquired an abandoned Adams Roadster project from a bereaved family who had no idea what it was or what to do with it. Patrick, on the other hand, knew exactly what it was and what to do with it. His past had led to a BA in three-dimensional design, and his final thesis was the design and development of the sports car compared to 1970s architecture. So I could understand his design appreciation together with mine of the Adams Roadster. Following some discussion about the car, it became apparent that it was in pretty poor shape, as it had been the subject of an unwieldy attack with an angle grinder in an attempt to fit one of Coventry's monstrous Jaguar V12 engines. The poor previous owner had all the best intentions, but did not believe that chassis rails were rather important, and promptly removed some of them to make room for the mountainous bulk of the V12. I'm not sure if the car ever made more than a cursory visit to the tarmac, which is a great relief for all the rest of us, as it would have been absolutely lethal if he had ever used it in anger. Patrick's original intention was to get the car built by a friend of his who specialises in Jaguar repairs. But that proved to be unfruitful, as in the specialist words, this is not a true Jaguar and not worth anything, so why would you bother? I rather gathered that he might not be the best person to undertake what was going to be a long and difficult project with that attitude. So suggested I might be tempted to take a look. A few pictures were emailed and financial terms outlined before the car duly arrived some weeks later. I say car, but what actually arrived was a loose collection of parts from various Jaguars, all the fiberglass body panels loosely attached with rope and other assorted fasteners to a green hammerite painted chassis. There was no engine or gearbox, so the interior, or what parcel one, was truly knackered, and the wiring showing from below the bodged dash panel was a mess of electrical chocolate block fasteners, insulation tape and Scotch lock wire joins. Things were not looking good. In fact, this abomination was far worse than starting with an unbuilt kit. It would mean we had to undo and correct all the previous builders' mistakes just to get back to ground zero. I was very, very close to calling the whole thing off and getting the car collected. But Patrick seemed genuine and enthusiastic, so we hatched the beginnings of a plan to bring the poor old thing back from the dead. This was going to be a big project. Quite how big, we were both to find out later. Resurrecting such a rare kit, number 2 of only 15 or 17 produced, and the only long wheelbase version ever built, as this is very challenging. You cannot phone anybody for advice or check out another example for inspiration. You are on your own, on a sky-high ride with no parachute. The obvious starting point was to completely strip the thing to its bare bones and see what we were starting with. This did not take too long, as most of it was barely hanging together. The front and rear wing bolts that were left in place had been left for a very good reason. They were rusted solid. Break out the grinder and spare no fasteners was the order for the team. And we eventually ended up with a chassis, assorted body panels laying on the grass outside the workshop, and the Jaguar front and rear suspension subframes on the workshop floor. The main chassis rails were intact, but the inner rails that form the K-member at the front of the car had been hacked out with a blunt angle grinder, and the exposed jagged ends just left hanging in the breeze. The clutch pedal had been used in place of the original brake pedal and had a 2-inch offset halfway up the pedal shaft, which would have folded in half the first time the brakes were used in anger. The front chassis gussets had been hacked out in the same fashion as the chassis rails, presumably to clear the industrial scale radiator it was going to take to cool the monster motor. And the list went on and on and on. After some time and some whiskey, I plucked up the courage to contact Patrick and give him the bad news, fully expecting him to pull the plug on the whole idea. But he quickly picked himself off the floor and confirmed that he wanted to keep going. A man with a mission after 23 years searching. Following a trip to Will Rockcliffe, my local friendly and very efficient sandblaster, we had a clean chassis sitting in the workshop and the build process could commence. I won't bore you with all the details, but if something could be bent or buggered up, it was. Correcting all the bodgery took many weeks, but eventually we managed to undo all the damage and replace all the missing and hacked up parts with fresh steel to bring the basic structure back to where it had started. After all the welding and grinding, it was time to set the body panels on the chassis to establish positions for the bulkhead, pedals, seat mounts, etc. before we painted anything. I had not really paid too close attention to the GRP panels up to this point, other than noting that it was the only long wheelbase version of the car ever to be made by Dennis and Peter Adams. But on closer inspection, my heart sank even further when I saw how they had extended the body by 12 inches. The rear body section had been chopped just behind the door closer post. A piece of scrap aluminium sheet had been pop riveted across the gap to extend it, and then the whole affair was smothered in gallons of body plop. Now, this would be fine to develop a plug from which to take a new mould, which I can only guess was their intention, but hopeless for any road use, as it would just crack and split, as was already beginning to happen. The extended front wings revealed another masterful misunderstanding of the expansion rates of steel and fiberglass. With a chunk of 12mm diameter stainless steel supporting bar, fiberglassed onto the back, then some mild steel sheet thrown in for good measure. Much doom followed much gloom, and the reality struck home that we would be making a set of body moulds to replace the defective wings and rear section. So, with Patrick reminding me it was the only long wheelbase Adams Roadster in the world, and deserving of all of my experience to save this wonderful car, we began. The process for making new panels from existing originals is not too complex, but these were huge. The front wings were 12 feet long and had a complex depression halfway along for the side-mounted spare wheels, which made the job much more involved. In the end, we made the decision to mould the spare wheel recess separately and glass them onto the back of the wings after they had been moulded, but before they were removed from the mould, so that they would stay the correct shape. The new front wings emerged resplendent in white gel finish and were offered up to the body before attention turned to the rear body section. Whereas the front wings only needed a bolt-on return flange and a separate wheel well to be made, the rear body was an entirely different kettle of fish. It ended up as a 6-piece mould with bolt-on flanges everywhere, more fasteners than a punk's favourite jeans, and weighed twice as much as I had imagined. Never mind, it worked well, and the resulting body panel popped out without drama and was pressed into immediate service. We now had a serviceable set of body panels and could start the long and arduous process that is panel alignment on a multi-section body. Have you ever wondered why Cobras are so popular with kit builders? The one-piece tub is a breeze to set up, and as long as you don't yank the rear body mounts down too tight and cock up the door gaps, it will usually go together in a day. Multi-piece bodies, on the other hand, take days, sometimes weeks, by the time each section is gapped, spaced, tweaked and fastened. Eventually, it all started to come together and looked like an Adams Roadster should. Very long, very low, and very glamorous. When minor details like a new brake pedal and master cylinder mounting, new steering column, removable gearbox crossmember, new engine mounts, etc. have been designed, made and fitted, it was time to actually start what most would assume to be a kit car build. The chassis was treated to many coats of epoxy chassis black paint and left to cure for a week while we were rebuilding and detailing the suspension. The Jaguar XJ6 running gear is an industry staple and has found its way under many a kit over the years, for very good reason. It is strong and well made, but can be tricky to overhaul if you do not have quite an array of specialist tools and a good tech manual to show how some of the more involved bits fit together. By far the most treacherous component, though, is definitely the front springs. If they have enough potential energy to keep 2 tons of Coventry's finest from nose diving into the tarmac, then they definitely have enough evil contained to remove various body parts if you are foolish enough to unleash them without due care. I made a special tool to compress the springs nearly 30 years ago and have used it many times, but it still induces rectal twitching every time it's pressed into service. With both front and rear subframes completely disassembled, we could start the process of refurbishing all the bushes and bearings, as well as making it all look fresh and new. Some suitably rated springs had been fitted in the past at the front and rear, so were sandblasted, along with all the rest of the suspension parts, and rebuilt into very shiny subframes. Now that the mechanical bits were being agreeable, it was time for more body work and to get all the panels rubbed down and ready for paint finishing. I enjoy doing as much of the build in-house as possible, so all the wiring, interior trim, chassis alignment, etc. is done here, but when it comes to paint I draw the line. It's not that I can't spray. I've spent many happy hours in a booth pointing a gun at an unsuspecting car, but modern paints are nasty, evil stuff. The car refinishing industry stopped using 2-pack isocyanate based paint some years ago for very good reason. The cyanide bit is a form of cyanide, which I'm sure we all know the long-term effects of. What's even more scary is that cyanide is cumulatively toxic. This means that even very small doses cannot be absorbed by the body and will just build up each time you spray it until it eventually becomes a lethal dose. Don't say I didn't warn you. Sensibly, I chose to farm out the painting chores to a local specialist who is also a good friend and allowed me to complete most of the panel preparation to try and keep the costs under control. After some time, and not inconsiderable sums of money, the body panels had received many coats of etch prime, high build primer surfacer, more primer, Jaguar racing green base coat, and a lovely shiny clear coat to top it all off. Now we were in business and could get all the panels fitted and aligned. It's a nerve-jangling affair assembling freshly painted body parts, as any wrong move could prove very costly. Fortunately, some carefully applied masking tape on the exposed edges and delicate use of tools ensured that all was well, and I could finally send some progress reports and photographs to Patrick that both resembled a car and were not gloomy. The decision had been made to buy in a pre-made wiring loom rather than fashion a bespoke unit, as it is inherently a very simple car. No fancy aircon or heated windscreens, no high-power lights or massive stereo, just plain and simple 1930s style instruments and lights with points ignition and a small alternator. We were making good progress and could now turn over the newly rebuilt 4.2 litre 6-pot on the starter motor, if only the starter would actually engage with the ring gear. The big problem with not having a donor to pull all the bits from is that you end up with parts from who knows how many different vehicles and models. Eventually, we found out that an auto gearbox flexible drive plate from a Jaguar fitted with a Borg-Warner 65 unit was not compatible with a Borg-Warner 66 gearbox and spacer. Who knew? Well, nobody it seems, so we had to take the gearbox out again and swap in known parts to get it all to play nicely together. It did confirm the benefits of the previously modified gearbox cross-member from a fixed unit to a removable item. Otherwise, the whole massive lump of Coventry iron engine would have had to come out as well. A mass of plumbing hoses followed the newly built radiator into the engine bay, followed by ignition wires, brake servos, yes two, one front and one rear to keep a split braking system, and all the other associated parts that pass as the normal contents of the powerhouse. A bespoke exhaust system with a lovely stainless steel centre box from Custom Chrome and 2 cherry bomb rear silencers let all the nasties escape from the rear, and when fired up gave a lovely subtle burble, which is just what the customer ordered. The original Jaguar front seats were treated to a makeover with some leather dye to match the light fawn colour Patrick had chosen for the interior. The seats were only the starting point, as I'd now had to source some matching vinyl from which to make the one-off rear seat and door cards. Quite a few evenings were spent buzzing away on the industrial sewing machine, creating a simple but elegant set of panels to suit the style of the car. The dash panel, which had been carved out of a multi-layer blank I had created, was also covered in vinyl, but this time in a contrasting forest green colour to add some accent and also reflect the exterior paint colour. With all the big bits starting to come together, it was now time to start fitting everything else. All the fuel system, the brake lines, the wiring loom, all the handmade bumpers and brackets, the folding windscreen and all the lights. I am massively simplifying the final fitting stages, but eventually the car was a running, driving machine, and I could now start testing and finessing all the systems that make a functioning motor car. It was surprising how small the cockpit was for such a large car, so my road testing proved a little less rewarding than I had hoped. My head stuck up above the windscreen, so the wind blast above 60 miles an hour was pretty extreme. After a few minor adjustments and tweaks, the Adams was duly presented for its first MOT test in many, many years and passed on the first go. After 18 months of graft, considerable amounts of money, both sweat and tears, it was finally complete. A unique, superbly rebuilt, Patrick's words, not mine, stunningly designed Adams Roadster. It is now bringing a huge smile to Patrick's face and making the people of Brighton wonder, wow, that's incredible. What on earth is it?
Just a dream. The next day you called me up, you told me I'm your little buttercup. You came over and you fell into my arms. Well, I know what I feel. Please tell me